I'm Natasha Ryan with Premier Risk Solutions, and this is our video series, Strong, Safe, and True. It's designed so we can sit down and chat with industry experts about security concerns and issues going on in today's workforce. And we want to make sure that your employees feel empowered and safe, therefore creating a great workspace. And with us today, we have Dr. Michael Corcoran, our friend, and he also works for Premier Risk Solutions in a consulting capacity, but you have such a rich history in this sector. So why don't you just give us a snippet, Dr. Corcoran?
Thanks, Natasha. Yeah, I started my career in 1970 when I entered the United States Secret Service. Mostly I was assigned during my tenure with them to what they call the Protective Intelligence Squad. That meant that we interviewed, if we could find them, the individuals that threatened the president or the vice president of the United States. If we couldn't find them, we developed profiles of them, and I know it's a nasty word, but that's what we did. And we had to determine what is the actual risk level of dangerousness of these individuals, and then decide how we were going to best protect the president if he ever got close to these individuals. So it was a good breeding ground for me to learn a lot of ins and outs of how to really do threat assessments and look for dangerousness in different areas. And during that time, of course, I went back to school to get my doctorate in behavioral science, so I better understand the psychology behind all this stuff. 1988, I opened up my own practice and basically have been doing this kind of stuff for companies, Fortune 500 companies, school districts, hospitals, all kinds of things, and including groups such as Premier Risk around the country, mostly in North America, some in Europe, some in Asia, but it's a lot of fun. A lot of different things come up all the time.
It's certainly interesting.
Yes.
You deal with a lot of interesting things.
Yes.
And of course, one of the most relevant things in today's world, and unfortunately workplace, is social media and all that comes along with that. So I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint so that we can dig right into this. I'm going to share my screen here. You know, it seems like working from home, right? More people are behind their screens, which I would imagine leads to a little more liberation to be nastier, for the better sake of a word. So let's talk a little bit about those folks that like to hide behind those screens and then use that anonymity to bully and harass.
Yeah, and you would think that they would understand that they're really not anonymous. They've got their picture generally right out there in front of their face, right out in front of people.
Yes.
But nonetheless, it does. Putting up that screen kind of gives them a sense of the fact that they are protected, that they cannot be seen, or at least they can't be touched. And so they feel more comfortable in becoming the bully or the harasser or any of those kinds of things. In essence, we have to realize and understand that bullies are cowards. Yeah. And consequently, they look for that kind of inroad, if you will, any type of little space that you give them, they're quick to capitalize on that. So any place that they feel kind of safe, they'll go ahead and start being themselves, which is obviously very disruptive to a workforce. And sometimes, quite honestly, sometimes they don't realize it, especially if it's a manager, a supervisor. They've been that way for years and years, and so they're not completely aware of it. But most of the time, they are, and they understand what's going on. So what I tell my clients to do is to be sure you make clear policies on how to handle these kinds of things. Be sure those are out there. Be sure that you've gotten things that they're understood by everybody, and that you follow up on them immediately. That's the biggest thing. People don't often do that. They'll just use it with, okay, we'll take that and we'll get to it. No, you got to do it right now. Not only is that extremely important when somebody reports it, but generally they've been putting up with it for a while. So there's the expectation you're going to do something about it right away. And so therefore, it really is important that you do that.
You know, someone watching may say, you know, why are we as a security company talking about social media? But the general idea here is if your employees don't feel safe, it could lead to mental health issues and volatile behavior, which then is when we have to employ security personnel. So the key component here is being proactive instead of reactive, right?
Absolutely right. And so then it even gets into the concept of, okay, well, how do we start making the workplace more conducive to safety?
Yeah.
And in the workplace, of course, we have OSHA. All employers understand OSHA, uh, basic duty clause back in 1970, and it's still the only thing that they've got around to enforce this type of thing, is that you must
Yeah.
provide for a safe work environment. Okay, well, does that imply that it has to be in the home? Well, back up until about when this whole COVID thing started, OSHA said, no, we're not in the business of going to homes. If somebody
Right.
calls me and they're in their workplace and they're from home, we at most call their employer and say they're complaining about an issue in their home.
Yeah.
We might want to take a look at it. But basically, they've always said, no, we're hands off. Home is a separate place. But now, OSHA's coming out and saying, well, yeah, we really have to take a more closer look at that. And we have to look at homes. And so the question becomes, how do you do an inspection of a home? Should you do an inspection of a
Right.
home? And what if your employee says, no, I don't want you in my home?
Right.
So you have to decide how you're going to do this. Are you going to have a questionnaire that they fill out and then send back to you, and you say, okay, that's good enough? And OSHA isn't real firm on exactly what they want yet either, because they're just getting their feet wet in this. For example, they've said things like, if you are on the phone and you walk into your hallway and you trip, that's a regular workplace thing. And so, yeah, that's a workers' comp thing, and we go from there. However, if you go out into the hallway and you're on your phone, and it's a business call, but you trip over your dog, that's not a workplace thing.
Yeah.
You understand the difference? I don't know how they come to that, but
Yeah.
they're still working out the kinks on that. So we all have to realize that it's the old saying, either part of the problem or part of the solution. And we just have to kind of hobble along, obviously, consult with your labor law attorney and really make sure that you feel comfortable with what it is you're coming up with, or even call OSHA. OSHA will be glad to talk to you about it. At least you can get something in writing from them, even though it will take several months to get that. But nonetheless, you can get something from them that answers your questions. So even that might be an alternative.
I have a question. So I'm sitting here thinking about social media, working from home, and you have these like physical aspects of safety, right? But
Right.
let's say, usually in a work database, everyone's address, phone number, they're typically in the system, right?
Correct.
And so if you have a colleague that's writing threatening things on social to another colleague, now they don't feel safe in their own home and it's affecting their workday. Are you getting phone calls like that at all? Are you seeing any of that?
Yeah, every once in a while. So what we have to get into, I found, because it's even developed into where people have sued the company, et cetera. And
Yeah.
so I've been through it enough times now where the granularity is amazing. In other words, okay, so what is this person doing to protect themselves? In other words, okay, I hear that they are relying on the employer to provide for a safe work environment, but what can the employee do as well? So we have to
Yeah.
make sure that they have an alarm system, make sure that they have taken all different kinds of precautions to make things that are safe, that they have locks on doors, all these kinds of things. And if in fact they've had a situation that they've reported to the police, and all these kinds of things that come up. So it's kind of a multi-layered issue, and it's nothing that is, there's no one thing to do. It's just a multitude of things. And I'd recommend
Sure.
that if employees looking at this and looking at it to do it well, there's plenty of research on the internet that you can find some of these things, but simply a phone call into someone like Premier Risk or myself would certainly help answer a lot of these kinds of questions.
Yeah. Okay. And speaking of social media, where do you, as an employer, to mitigate possible situations like we just talked about, the acceptance of viewpoints versus unprofessionalism on social media sites?
Absolutely. And it starts with policies. There's no question about it. It has to.
Yeah.
And as I've always said, it's wise to try and get as much buy-in as possible in your policies. I know it seems kind of different than what we used to do. The company would just pull out the policies and that would be it. But in today's world, the employees expect a little bit more involvement. They want to get a little bit more buy-in. And quite frankly, research has shown that by getting them more involved in this and coming up with some of their ideas does make for a more positive environment and does make for a better workforce. So I would recommend doing that, trying to gain support and input from as many people as you can. And then, of course, follow those policies, whatever those
Yep.
policies may be. Just follow up on them immediately. Don't let them dangle, and don't let it wait until tomorrow. You got to be consistent with it and be up right on top of it.
All right. Well, Dr. Corcoran, thank you. And of course, as he said, you know, we can do consulting. We can bring Dr. Corcoran to you. Risk assessments, workplace violence mitigation. We can have any type of security personnel on site, armed, unarmed. So any of these services that you might have questions about, you can feel free to contact me. My information is right here, my phone number, my email. Again, I'm Natasha Ryan. And Dr. Corcoran, really want to say thank you for being with us today. And please continue to come back to our website, premierrisksolutions.com, because we're going to continue to have conversations like this. And again, the goal is just to help you as an employer and companies make their employees feel safe and empowered, and hence, you know, really making that a really great work space. Okay, in the meantime, thanks again, Dr. Corcoran. Thanks to all of you. I'm Natasha Ryan. Stay strong, safe, and true.